Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you are standing on the edge of a great, jagged cliffside. The wind is whipping against your face, cold and indifferent, and the drop below is a silent, bottomless void of shadows. Your heart begins to hammer against your ribs like a trapped bird. Your palms grow slick with a cold sweat, and your breath hitches in the back of your throat. This is the moment the ancient machinery of your biology takes over. In this split second, a surge of chemicals floods your system, screaming at you to turn back, to run, to hide, to survive. This is the first wave. It is raw, it is violent, and it is entirely untrustworthy. Most people live their entire lives as slaves to this immediate, visceral reaction, believing that the pounding in their chest is a signal of truth. They think that because they feel afraid, the situation is impossible. But the architect knows better. The architect knows that the first 3 seconds of fear are nothing more than a ghost, a primitive echo from a world that no longer exists, designed to keep you safe in a cave, not to help you build an empire in the modern world. If you want to understand why you must never trust that initial spark of terror, you have to look at the anatomy of the heist occurring inside your skull. When fear strikes, your brain is effectively being robbed. The amygdala, that tiny almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep in your temporal lobe, has one job: to detect threats. It is lightning fast, far faster than your logic, far faster than your reason. In less than a blink of an eye, it hijacks your nervous system. It diverts the blood flow away from the prefrontal cortex, the part of you that dreams, plans, and solves complex problems, and sends it to your limbs. It prepares you to fight or to flee. In those first 3 seconds, you are not a man, you are a reactive animal. You are incapable of seeing the nuance of the situation, the hidden opportunity, or the simple fact that the threat you are facing is likely just an ego-crushing conversation or a risky business move, not a saber-toothed tiger. When you act in those first 3 seconds, you're letting a primitive survival mechanism drive a vehicle it doesn't know how to steer. Think back to the great masters of history, the men who stood in the center of the storm while everything around them dissolved into chaos. Think of the deep-sea divers who find themselves tangled in wreckage, hundreds of feet below the surface, where the darkness is absolute and the oxygen is fading. Their first instinct is to gasp, to struggle, to thrash. If they trust those first 3 seconds of fear, they die. They have to train themselves to ignore the screaming of their own blood. They have to wait. They have to breathe through the static of the panic until the blood returns to the king, the logic center of the brain. Only then can they see the knot that needs to be untied. Only then can they find the path back to the light. Your life is no different. Every time you feel the urge to quit because a task feels too heavy, or every time you stay silent in a room where you should have spoken because your throat felt tight, you are letting the first 3 seconds of fear dictate the boundaries of your existence. You are letting the ghost win. We are told by modern society to trust our gut and to listen to our feelings, but this is perhaps the most dangerous advice a person can follow when they are trying to transcend the average. Your gut is often just a collection of old traumas and biological shortcuts that prioritize comfort over growth. Fear is not an indicator of danger. Most of the time, in the 21st century, fear is an indicator of expansion. It is the friction that occurs when you reach the edge of your current self and prepare to step into someone new. If you retreat the moment the friction starts, you will remain a static, unfinished version of yourself. The secret to the biological override is learning to sit in the fire of those first 3 seconds without moving a single muscle. You have to watch the fear as if it were a weather pattern passing over a mountain. The mountain doesn't move because the wind is howling. The mountain doesn't shrink because the clouds are dark. It remains, it observes, it waits for the sky to clear. knowing that the sky always clears. Imagine the version of you that could have existed if you had simply waited out the panic. Think of the doors that remained closed because the handle felt too cold to touch. We often mistake the absence of fear for courage, but that is a lie. Courage is the clinical observation of fear. It is the ability to look at the trembling of your own hands and say, "I see you," but you do not have a vote in what happens next. When you begin to practice this, something incredible happens to your neuroarchitecture. You begin to widen the gap between the stimulus and the response. You create a sanctuary inside your own mind where the chemical ghosts cannot reach you. In that gap, you find your freedom. In that gap, you find the architect. You realize that the intense, overwhelming pressure you feel in the moment of a crisis is actually the fuel you need to perform, but only if you have the discipline to wait for the adrenaline to settle into focus, rather than letting it explode into a retreat. The shift begins the moment you stop running from the discomfort and start studying it with the cold curiosity of a scientist. When you feel that first surge of panic, you must learn to ask yourself a singular, grounding question. What is actually happening in this moment, beneath the noise? If you can strip away the stories you tell yourself, the story that you're not good enough, the story that everyone is watching you fail, the story that this pain will last forever, what you are left with is just biology. It is just a racing heart. It is just a shallow breath. It is just a tightening in the pit of your stomach. These are not prophecies of doom. They are merely physical data points. By labeling them as such, you reclaim the power of the observer. You transition from being the person who is drowning to being the person who is watching the water from the shore. This is the essence of disidentification, the primary tool in the architect's arsenal. It is the realization that you are the vessel in which these emotions occur, but you are not the emotions themselves. As you linger in that quiet, observant space beyond the 3-second mark, the world begins to change shape. The obstacle that looked like an impenetrable wall suddenly reveals its cracks. The person who intimidated you starts to look as fragile and driven by their own ghosts as anyone else. The high-stakes decision that felt like a life-or-death gamble becomes a calculated move on a much larger board. This is where true strategy is born. In the silence that follows the initial storm of fear, you gain access to a level of clarity that the average person never experiences. While they are still recoiling from the blow, you are already calculating your counter-move. This is the competitive advantage of the disciplined mind. You aren't faster or smarter than the rest of the world because of some innate talent. You are simply operating with the full capacity of your brain, while everyone else is trapped in their survival hardware. But building this fortress of the mind requires a daily, relentless practice. It is not something you decide to do once. It is a choice you make every time you encounter the slightest resistance. It starts with the small things. It starts when you feel the urge to check your phone because you're bored or uncomfortable, and you choose to wait 3 seconds before reaching for it. It starts when you feel the bite of a cold shower and you stand still instead of jumping out. Every time you deny the impulse, you are laying a brick. You are conditioning your nervous system to understand that you are the master, not the servant. You are teaching your amygdala that its frantic alarms will no longer trigger an automatic response. Over time, these small victories accumulate into a profound sense of self-trust. You begin to walk through the world with a different posture, because you know, deep in your marrow, that no matter what the world throws at you, your internal cockpit will remain steady. The tragedy of the modern age is that we have built a world designed to keep us in a state of perpetual, low-level panic. The notifications, the headlines, the endless comparison. They are all designed to keep you trapped in those first 3 seconds of reaction. A man in a state of reaction is easy to manipulate, easy to distract, and easy to keep small. To reject the first 3 seconds of fear is to commit a radical act of rebellion against a system that wants you weak. It is to choose the path of the sovereign. It means understanding that your greatest enemy isn't the person across from you, or the economy, or the circumstances of your birth. It is the chemistry inside your own skull that begs you to stay safe at the cost of your soul.